How could you not add, and we're evil pieces of shit to the end of that sentence? How do you not add that?
It's a good question, Jimmy. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, what's going on, you beautiful people? It's your boy Vin in the house. This is Middle America. If you're new to the channel, we discuss everything that's going on in America. Not from the left, not from the right, but from the correct perspective, which is mine. If you want to be part of the conversation, dear listener, you can join us, facebook.com/America Middle. It's currently free. You can join the conversation. We've got great moderators. It is a free speech environment, so folks, let it fly. We've got Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, anarchists. Speaking of anarchy, we're actually going to be having a little mini debate about anarchy in Middle America, and I'm going to moderate, which I'm assuming already biases the debate because you wouldn't have a moderator in an anarchist context. Who knows? You'll have to tune in to know when the debate's going to happen. Anyway, unless you've been living under a rock, Jimmy Dore has emerged as the premier voice of the everyday man left winger. Now, depending on what video you watch, that determines how you view your brother Vincent. Now, it was really, really interesting because I was reviewing comments today. One person said that they agreed with what I said in the video, but he down-thumbed the video because I'm a straight-up Marxist. Another guy said, this guy's a regular, I'll call him Mark P. Another guy said of my previous video that I took Mr. Biden out of context and that blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, did AOC take him out of context? Oh, sorry, Kamala. We took Kamala out of context. This video is about, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Jimmy Dore speak, and then I'm just going to comment because maybe Mark, my leftist friend, who continuously calls me a shill for Trump and all the rest of it. You know, you got folks some folks live in a very, very simplistic binary world where unless you support their guy, that automatically means you're supporting Trump. Dun, dun, dun! Okay, enough with the theatrics. This video is about ICE. I'm sure you guys all know who and what ICE are. They are a...
So here's a great labor...
They're basically the border patrol / police type of thing, combination of the two. They came to prominence about 2 years ago during the whole Trump presidency. As far as the national consciousness goes, ICE has been around for a while, but as far as the national consciousness goes, you had AOC and the rest of them talking about banning ICE, defunding ICE. ICE is terrible. ICE is horrible. So it became very in style for people to say that ICE is a terrible, horrible organization. Now, me personally, I know folks that know folks. Let me say it that way. And their assessment, and I fully trust the assessment of this individual. And yes, anyway, their assessment about ICE is that he told me, hey, they're good guys. They're just doing their job, that type of thing. I actually think we have a Hispanic Middle American who's also, if not an ICE agent, at least adjacent to them. Jimmy starts off by talking about how Biden actually plussed $18 million to the ICE budget this year. More than actual Trump. Actually, Trump between 19 and 20 actually decreased his ICE funding, and then Mr. Biden bumped it up a bit. Now, Jimmy has a problem with that, obviously, because all leftists have a problem with ICE. And as my brother Mike is pointing out to many of my friends, Mr. Trump is no longer the president. Mr. Biden is the president. So what happens in regard to our foreign and domestic policy now resides squarely on the shoulders of Mr. Biden and his vice president, Miss Kamala Harris, a person of color who was selected for very obvious reasons, which we will talk about in a second. Now, what I'm about to share with you Some of it is going to be new, but some of you who have been watching Middle America know that I predicted damn near all of this. Now, is it because Vincent is very intelligent? No, not very intelligent. I was just talking to one of my buddies. It took me 5 years to graduate high school. They wanted to put me in special ed for ADD, and if I didn't have a raucous Jamaican mother, God knows, which is one of the reasons I homeschool my kids. Now, having said all that, let's go to Jimmy Dore. This is Jimmy Dore talking about the budget and saying, you know, these guys really are not good for, haven't been very good for Mexican people. Now, who would have thought? Who would have thought that? Let's see what Jimmy has to say.
So I just want you to know this. Voting for Joe Biden has not been good for immigrants or for the ICE budget. It's been great for ICE.
Voting for Joe Biden hasn't been good for immigrants. Now, I'm not laughing at Jimmy, because Jimmy was sounding the alarm just like I was about how horrible of a ticket Joe Biden and Kamala Harris was for people of color. Of course, Mr. Dore is white, so there was a limit to what he could say, but there was no limit to what I could say. And I explained to people over and over again, ignorant people who needed knowledge, like my brother Mark. I said, Mark, this man is a racist. You know, I had a conversation with a person, and I was talking about how Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And I literally had to shoot a video to explain why that was a racist comment. I literally had to explain it to brother. I'm pretty sure it's the same fella. Who would have thought? The guy that said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And the guy who, when confronted with his role in playing a party to the deporter-in-chief, namely Barack Hussein Obama, when this Mexican activist, while Mr. Biden was campaigning, was saying, hey, you deported 3 million people, you destroyed families, what are you going to do different in your administration? You know what Mr. Biden said? Did Mr. Biden say, hey, Barack Hussein Obama was a great president and I love him and maybe we could have done things differently? If we had to do it over again, we would have done something differently? Now, that's what most politicians do. It's called lying through your teeth in politicking. They don't really mean it, but that's what you do. You lie to people when you want them to vote for you. But if you believe that the person has no choice but to vote for you, and if you have zero respect for the person, how are you going to respond? So how did Brother Biden respond? He responded by saying, go vote for Trump. That's what he said. Go vote for Trump.
Biden administration.
Go vote for Trump. That's what this Mexican activist
Biden administration
was told. So, having said all that, Jimmy, we know that Mr. Biden is not good for Mexican people. He's not good for black people either. But let's see here. Maybe things have changed. Let's see.
Has now been enforcing ICE contracts that encourage forced labor for immigrants, not
encourage forced labor for immigrants. Now, Jimmy, now you've crossed the line, because forced labor is simply a euphemism for slavery. And there's no way in the world that Joe Biden would do such a thing, especially considering the comment he just made to that Mexican fella. And there's no way in the world that Kamala, a person of color, would ever stand for such a thing. Forced labor. Shame on you, Jimmy. We continue.
Since Biden's been in office, ICE has signed a new contracts with private prison firms worth more than $260 million. The majority have been drafted since April.
What? No, that can't be right. You know what's funny? At the beginning of the Biden administration, he drafted a document and basically told the Department of Justice not to renew many of their federal prison contracts, because if you've seen the documentary 13th, you can see how slavery technically has never been excised from the American economy. The 13th Amendment, while freeing slaves, also created a slave class in America. You know how you take the balloon and you squeeze it and it pops out the other way? It's called the prison industrial complex. Literally, the 13th Amendment literally says, we cannot hold you as a slave unless you break the law and you end up in prison. So, especially in the South, this gave birth to policing, slave patrols, etc. You had newly freed black people who are now free, could not be enslaved at Massa's plantation, but then, what do you know? They had no jobs. They were walking around, and then that's when you had the vagrant Negro who was then ensconced and thrown in prison. And wouldn't you know it, outside you were free, but the 13th Amendment gives us a loophole where we can enslave you. And that's literally one of the ways in which our economy has been supported. Now, there's a prison labor, slave labor, that Apple, Victoria's Secret, you're going to Victoria's Secret in the mall, get your shorty a little something, something. That was probably made by some dude in a cell getting paid $1 a day. That's called slavery by another name. That's what that's called. And it's very weird. I keep hearing from many of my capitalist friends, the capitalist and economic system is the only system that lifts people from poverty to wealth. If that's the case, if it's such an awesome system, why, oh why, has there never been a moment in American history where there hasn't had to be a slave class? Whether it's slaves on the plantation, slaves in prison, whether it's 8-year-old girls who have to work naked in facilities during the Industrial Revolution, and breaker boys who are under the earth making $20 a month because we don't have child labor laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why is it our economy constantly has to get upheld by enslaved, weak, and vulnerable people? It's very, very interesting. But here's the big thing. I was kicking myself about this because I actually gave Biden some props, because this has been a major issue, and since the documentary 13th come out, there's been a lot of angst about the prison industrial complex, how these massive companies are making or saving millions and billions of dollars over years and decades by this cheap prison labor, and the obvious implication of adding an economic incentive to imprisoning human beings. And do you know, dear listener, who the number one architect of the modern prison industrial complex is? That's right, that would be the author of the crime bill, which was designed specifically to get minority people in jail in bunches. He goes by the name of Joseph Biden, our current president. And all you silly people who were telling me that Trump was a racist, all you nice white people who were telling me that you knew what was better for people of color than I did and anybody else did, and all you silly people who were telling me, oh, just overlook that, like one of these people, I think it's that's the same guy. And when I listed the crime bill, which is almost universally recognized as a racist, destructive, horrifically evil policy, when Mr. Biden refused to repent for it, even though Hillary Clinton lied through her teeth and Bill Clinton lied through her teeth and apologized. Remember, this man has no respect for people of color, so he refused. And all you silly people were telling me that Trump was an existential threat. And one of you, I'm not going to name you, trying to tell me I was selfish for trying to prioritize people of color in this situation. Let's continue. So now, here's where I gave Biden some credit. I gave Mr. Biden credit because he drafted that document and said, "Hey, we're not going to renew these. We're not going to renew these bills, right? We're not going to renew these things where we can have these deals with the prisons." Well, I think that's great. I think that's really, really good. Let's look at a couple things, though. Here is a criticism about Biden's. So I said, hey, man, he did the right thing there. That's good. So I gave Biden his flowers. You know, the kids are talking about, give me my flowers while I'm here. Don't wait till I'm gone. Here's a problem, though. There's an advocate, because thank God for advocates, who are bringing attention to this stuff. There's a wonderful young woman named Miss Morgan Simon, and Miss Morgan Simon says the following: Biden's executive order, she argued, does not address the fact that the majority of government contracting with private prison companies is actually with ICE, and that ICE facilities managed by private prison companies have equally been shown to be hotbeds of human suffering. So let me get it straight. Biden hears the outcry about the 13th. People were criticizing him because of the crime bill. And so he comes to us and does his performative bullshit act and says, I am not going to renew a bunch of these private prison contracts, except for with ICE. And ICE is the vast majority of incarcerated folks in these private prisons. You see a little shell game he did? All you people trying to act like Joe Biden is dumb. All you people trying to act like Joe Biden is stupid. I'm sorry. Either he is extremely cynically evil, or somebody, Barack Obama, is pulling the strings that we don't know. But either way, that was a very calculating move, right? You hear this outcry, you say, oh yeah, we're not going to renew these contracts. And then you give a loophole to the lion's share of where the contract money is coming from. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, when Biden increases the ICE budget by 18 million, and then he co-signs a bill, and you haven't heard the worst of it yet, to continue to bring these people into the pipeline, do you think that he has any intention of resolving that issue down there in a way that's going to be friendly to Mexican nationals? Does that make sense to you? Do you think that that's what his intentions are? That $18 million that he gave to ICE is going to be made up in what, 3 or 4 weeks, right? Unbelievable. We continue.
Hey, how can we make a situation like ICE even worse? I know. Let's put them all in private prisons and make them do forced prison labor. Isn't that fantastic? Even worse, ICE contracts include new language condoning the exploitation of those awaiting immigration hearings.
Did you catch that? Immigration hearings. So I am going over, let's say I'm from Guatemala and I just rescued my child from attempted sex trafficker, and I say, holy moly, I got to get out of this horrible place that the Americans ruined. And you make it all the way to the border. Then you go to a hearing to determine whether or not you have a valid case. What are you going to do between when you get to the hearing and when you get a decision? What do you do? What do we do with those people? Well, here's what we do.
Not condemning, condoning.
Let me rewind that for you.
Hey, how can we make a situation like ICE even worse? I know. Let's put them all in private prisons and make them do forced prison labor. Isn't that fantastic? Even worse, ICE contracts include new language condoning the exploitation of those awaiting immigration hearings.
Here's Robbie. Beautiful Robbie is saying, just a sec. Legal refugees are being used as forced labor? Robbie, look. Exploitation of those awaiting hearings. That means a decision hasn't been made. So when you get scooped up at the border as an illegal, whether you're a refugee, a legitimate refugee, legal refugees, which I'm not messing with. I'm not messing with you, Rob. I'm just talking about the terminology, okay? Yeah, you could be a legal refugee awaiting a hearing, and while you're being held, you get sent to an ICE facility, which, as Miss Morgan said, is a hotbed of human suffering. But we just signed a $260 million contract with these prison prison capitalist. That's not civilized behavior, Rob says. You see, we got people all over the place in Middle America, and Rob's a beautiful brother, so he's using very reserved language. But I won't, because I'm not a beautiful brother. As you can see, we continue.
Not condemning, condoning. Condoning. Detainee labor, meaning immigrants, shall be used in accordance, immigrant labor shall be used in accordance with the approved detainee work plan and shall be paid $1 a day. And how could you not add, and we're evil pieces of shit to the end of that sentence? How do you not add that?
Now you see, $1 a day. $1 a day. So if these beautiful people worked for 365 days, they'd only get $365. And that means nobody works 7 days a week straight. So these people are ending up anywhere between $250 and $350 a year. I mean, just for perspective. Some of us make that in a day, doing a quarter of the actual labor, because these folks are laboring. That we're putting these folks to work if we're doing that. Holy moly. You'll be paid $1 a day. That's Joe Biden. But didn't I tell you at the beginning of this? Okay, so now we see why Robbie's such a good dude, because he's from the UK. I could almost hear the accent. Anytime I see somebody with a gentle response, I always assume they're European, because that's one of the things I've discovered. Europeans are the most gentle, beautiful people on the planet. You're also descendants of murderers, but aren't we all? We continue. The difference, though, with Europeans is that my European friends seem to understand that since their fathers and their fathers' fathers were murderers, that they need to learn from the mistakes of their ancestors. See, Europeans have figured out how to celebrate their ancestors and vilify them simultaneously. Americans haven't figured that out. You tell an American what their ancestors have done, well, a certain demographic of American, what their ancestors have done, they go crazy, get very defensive, get very, very emotional, and they'll call you a snowflake even though they're doing this. But remember I brought up Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris is a person of color. And she is not going to stand for this treatment of people of color. This is Kamala Harris, by the way. So let's see. What is Kamala Harris? Kamala is going to come in and save the day. I guarantee you. Kamala is going to come and save the day. Now look, if they pay them at least minimum wage, if they get accepted into the country, they'd have at least a stable job and a place to integrate into society. That's a very, very good point. That's an extremely good point. If you actually set these people up in a program, fine, give them a minimum wage. Okay, fine. I mean, in Cali, I think minimum wage is $50. I'm not sure. Give them a minimum wage, get them integrated in the community while they're waiting. That way, they can pay, wouldn't you know it, half their housing, so they wouldn't have to sit in a cage or a prison cell. They could actually have some like transitional housing. And to Robbie's point, or to Mike's point, let them work so that they could actually pay for their own residency, give them some dignity after they did that giant trek, and then decide, inshallah, whether or not they could stay in the country. Now, here's Mike. Mike just heard this situation. He wasn't prepped. He came up with a very just, beautiful way to solve this problem that makes everybody happy. You know why? Because Mike is trying to find a way to see the humanity in these people. So it's not very difficult. These people are pretending all this stuff is very complex and difficult. And surely there are some moving gears here that we need to think about. But that solution isn't crazy, is it? What about Kamala? Kamala is here to help. Kamala is here to help. Let's see.
So this is a pattern. So Kamala Harris did this when she was the attorney general here.
Wait a second. Kamala Harris. It says how Kamala Harris was trying to keep nonviolent prisoners locked up. What's Jimmy talking about?
California. As California Attorney General, she spent years subverting a 2011 Supreme Court ruling requiring the state to reduce its prison population.
She spent years subverting. This was one of the reasons. Y'all remember this when Tulsi completely destroyed Kamala, ended her presidential run? You know, CNN and all them boys are trying to really set Shorty up as the next one. And it made a lot of sense, right? We had Barack Hussein Obama, first black president. The Democrats, we pulled that off. They tried to pull it off with Hillary. That didn't work because she was so horrifically unpopular. So the next thing they did was they tried to set up another stooge, Kamala, astaghfirullah, I shouldn't do that. She's our vice president. They tried to set somebody else up who was not qualified for the job. I can say that. The Bible says, do not speak evil of a ruler of your people, and she is a ruler of us, so we need to be completely respectful, even when we're criticizing their policy. Now, listen. Kamala Harris fought on a multitude of occasions to keep prisoners in because there was an overcrowding problem of prisoners, mostly black and brown. There is an overcrowding problem of prisoners. So you know what the prisons decided to do? The prison said, whoa. How about we take some of these nonviolent offenders who got like a 1 to 3? Let's just find a bunch of them who are doing a good job and are not, messing with anybody, and let them out early so we can have some space. Kamala fought that on a multitude of occasions. Nonviolent offenders now. Let me give you an example of a nonviolent offense. Somebody gets bagged up or jammed up for having a couple ounces of weed on them. They get a 1 to 3, right? And then 5 years later, everybody, every block in every neighborhood in Maine now has a weed store out. It's nonviolent crime. As a matter of fact, some people would say it's a community service. So these brothers are languishing in prison while their white friends are all becoming millionaires. All these dudes are becoming millionaires all over the place now. So California was saying, hey, how about we just let some of these folks out of jail so we can have some space? Because we got a human suffering problem here. How did Kamala respond?
The overseeing judicial panel nearly found the state in contempt of court because she wouldn't. They had overcrowded prisons. They were ordered to release prisoners. She wouldn't do it, and her.
Kamala refused. They almost held. She was the AG. They almost held her in contempt of court because she refused the order. That's Kamala. And you all these people were telling me that I have to vote for Trump if I love black people. This is Kamala, who she criminalized truancy. Not only did she take them little brown boys and throw them in jail for skipping school, she also did that to their mothers. If your kid got picked up for truancy, Kamala would arrest you. She actually set up a perp walk of a woman whose child was truant from school. You know what a perp walk is when you call the media and say, we're going to arrest somebody, and then you walk them out there in front of everybody to embarrass them and make a big, it's like, hey, look at the game that I just shot. That's a perp walk. And she did that to a mother whose child was truant. And of course, the mother was black. Of course. Kamala paraded that black woman out there in her pajamas. Wouldn't even let her get dressed. In her pajamas. That's Kamala Harris. You silly people. You're sitting there telling all black people we need to vote for Biden and Kamala. Now these Mexicans are suffering more than under Trump. Trump reduced ICE's bill. He reduced it. He reduced their their pay structure. Of course, Biden has to increase it because the border is a veritable mess. Say what you want about Trump. Say what you want. But Kamala won't go down there, and she's in charge of that entire operation. But we continue. What was Kamala's logic? What was Kamala's logic for not allowing these people to go free when the court ordered them to? What was her logic? These are actually violent people. This is not good for the state of California. What was Kamala's logic, everyone? Oh, actually, I think Jimmy has the answer.
Argued in court that the reason why they weren't releasing prisoners was because it would upset their prison labor force. They're slave labors. That's why you got to stay in prison, because we need you to work as a slave.
I want you to see her.
We can't even get $15 minimum wage. They want more slave labor.
And she did this. She did this. She enforced slave labor in the prison system in California when she had power.
What Jimmy doesn't mention is that the type of labor that these guys were doing. Guys, come close. Let me tell you what these non-violent offenders that Kamala wanted. So do you see the logic? We can't let these people out, Judge. Judge says, well, think about it, Kamala. These are non-violent offenders. They've got very good behavior. We've got a human suffering issue. The jails are overcrowded. Let's let these people go, most of whom are going to be black and brown. No, we can't. Well, why? Is it because they're violent? No, they're not violent. Well, why? Because, Judge, you know the 13th Amendment? We're getting some next to basically free labor. And do you know, dear listener, what that labor was? Firefighting. Yes, firefighting. These brothers were paid below minimum wage to risk their lives. To literally risk their lives. And Kamala didn't want to give them their freedom and reunite them with their families because she was worried about the budget. Now do you see why Joe Biden selected her and not Stacey from Georgia? Voter suppression Stacey, black Stacey, who stood up to Trump and basically flipped Georgia blue. Why did he select Kamala instead of Stacey? Now you know why. Because Stacey, I believe, wouldn't have stood for it. I don't think Ron Paul would stand for it. I think there is a bunch of people on the left and the right that wouldn't stand for that nonsense. But Kamala will. She has proven decade after decade that she is all about selling out people of color so that she can advance her own political ideology. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing this. We are responsible for this. And when I say we, I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm not talking about Democrats. You know, every time Trump did something crazy, I'd always see one of my left-wing friends saying, if you voted for Trump, you're responsible for this. Listen, guys, I'm a Christian. My worldview is biblical. You might have another worldview. I'm a collectivist, and so are you. We are all collectively responsible. Just like when we bombed children in Afghanistan, we are collectively responsible because our tax dollars bought that bomb from Skunk Works. Our tax dollars facilitate ICE and all these other people. When it says Biden approved a contract with a private prison, the approval is what to do with our money. We are doing this. We are responsible. Some of you, no. I didn't vote for Biden. I'm not responsible. Let me ask you a question. How many redcoats did you dispatch from 1776 to the end of the Revolutionary War? I'm going to go ahead and guess 0. And yet, in less than 30 days, you and everybody in your family are going to celebrate the 4th of July. You had nothing to do with the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. Those beautiful words, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed with inalienable rights given to them by their creator. Or as our president said, I'm not going to say that because I'm not supposed to mock our leaders. You know that. You know that on July 4th, you're going to celebrate because you know that even though you weren't there, that you reap the benefits of what our fathers did from July 4th, 1776 to the end of the revolution. You benefit from being in the greatest country on the planet. You cannot sit in a country, reap all the benefits, and then take none of the culpability. That's not how it works. It's all of one or all of the other. So I reap the benefits of being in the greatest country on planet Earth. Shout out to all my UK friends, but America is the greatest country that's ever been. I reap those benefits. That means, and I didn't earn them. I didn't earn what all those folks did in 1776 to get freedom. I didn't earn all the brothers that died in John Brown in the Civil War to get freedom. I didn't earn Malcolm X and all. I didn't earn any of this. Now, the stuff that I've earned, but you understand what I'm saying. There are people that work way harder than me and you put together times a million that will never have the kind of cushy life we live in this country. So we do not get to absorb all the benefits and then push away all the culpability to the politicians. Sorry, politics is simply the public zeitgeist expressed in policy. So we are all responsible. However, if you voted for Joe Biden, you are more responsible. Sorry, y'all. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. All y'all were saying that. Oh, you voted for Trump, you're responsible for this. Oh, you voted for Trump, you're responsible. Okay. You voted for Biden, you are more responsible for that slave labor injustice than I am, because I didn't vote for him. So we're all responsible as Americans, but all you people who voted for Biden, you're responsible. And if you are not enraged by this, if you can't even bring yourself to say that's not civilized like my brother did, then you, the entire time, were just being performative and just acting, and you were just as racist and nasty as Kamala and Biden, and you don't really care about human suffering. All you care about is making sure that your team wins and you get to live your nice, cushy little suburban American life, and you can self-righteously act like you did something good for the world by getting rid of Donald Trump. Look, I understand that the media for the last 4 years has been running a psychological operation, the likes of which are unbelievable. And had you convinced that Donald Trump was the Antichrist, I'm sorry. And I know that the media had you convinced that Donald Trump was the arch dragon of the KKK. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump has not gone on record talking about he doesn't want his children in a racial jungle. I had to explain to somebody why not wanting your children in a racial jungle in the context of integration, why that was a racist statement. I literally had to explain to that guy why it was a racist statement. I'll tell you what, left-wing racists, I can't deal with them. Right-wing racists, I love them because they'll tell you, look, I'm a racist. What did Trump do after we killed Baghdadi, after we killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? You remember what he said? He said, yeah, man, we killed him. He died like a dog, blah, blah, blah. He was scared. Blah, blah. And then he said, then they were like, well, ISIS had control of the oil and all that. It's a great thing. We're going to be able to give that back to the Iraqi people. They've got a young burgeoning nation that's going to be great for them. And what did Trump say? Trump said, I don't know about that, bro. Trump said, I'm still kind of entitled. Trump was like, hey, we spent all this money and blood fighting for, so we're going to take some of this oil now. Right? He just came out and said it. I'm thinking about taking the oil, which is just theft. But at least he says it. Trump has never pretended to care about anything other than himself and America first. I can deal with that. I can't deal with this nonsense. I can't deal with Kamala. Remember the last video with Kamala? I can't deal with that. Because on top of being an evil racist person, now on top of that, you're insulting my intelligence and Mike's intelligence and Chris's intelligence and B. Cherry's intelligence and Art's intelligence. Don't insult us. Be straight up like Trump. We went over there, I'm taking their oil. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Unbelievable stuff, guys. This is evil. This is evil. And look, I'm an unabashed Christian. I'm unashamed. And I believe there's a God in heaven. And listen, I know a lot of Christians love to jump on the homosexuality thing, blah, 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 blah. And they love to bring up Sodom and Gomorrah as the reason that God destroyed homosexuality, as the reason that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And I want you guys to know that this is what I'll leave you with. And again, I understand not everybody's a Christian. Some of you are going to tune out. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I just want to show you why I am extremely upset about this. Okay? So I know we've heard a lot about Sodom and Gomorrah and how nasty they were. It's because they were gay, blah, blah, blah. That's what people want to tell you. I'm going to leave you with a little verse, and then you do what you will with that. Okay? Guys, the reason I'm so exercised about this issue in particular, is not because I am the descendants of people who were kidnapped into slavery, and it's not because I myself am an immigrant, although I am. My initial and ultimate reason is because Mexican, Guatemalan, and other people are creating the image and likeness of God, and we have a moral obligation and duty to take care of them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there is only one way to take care of them, but it is certainly not this nonsense. Now, this is why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed according to God. This was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant. Oh, we can just go into your country. I had somebody say, hey, no country is guaranteed stability. And the context that this brother made that statement was in the context of his recognition that we've gone all through the world, particularly in Latin America, and completely wrecked that region of the world. And now when these poor people have to deal with the ramifications of our bullshit, he comes back and says, hey, you're not guaranteed security. Arrogance. Arrogant. We can just walk through the world, do what we want to anyone, and nobody can touch us because we're America. Arrogant. Overfed and unconcerned. I'm not going to touch that one. I'm not going to touch that one. Overfed and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. I saw Ron Paul. He said, why should I have to pay for other person's health insurance? Yeah, why should you have to help the poor and the needy? They were haughty. That's just us being America. You know America? And did detestable things before me. Now, I'm not one of these weird people, okay? The detestable thing there is an abomination. To'eva, I think is the to'eva, I think is the Hebrew word. It means abomination. And that probably has to do with the attempted gang rape of the two visitors. Please note, the folks in Sodom and Gomorrah were not in committed monogamous relationships. The homosexuality that we saw in Sodom and Gomorrah was an entire city full of dudes trying to rape two very, in their minds, vulnerable immigrants. And you know what's interesting? We reported on this last year. There are multiple reports of sexual assaults of children and women in ICE facilities. Some committed by ICE agents themselves. Forced abortions, forced sterilizations, whole 9 yards. Ted Cruz and the pro-life right wing had nothing to say. So literally everything that provoked God to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah is present in this system, only worse, because there's nothing about forced slavery and incarceration and putting people in cages like animals. So if we don't repent and God doesn't destroy us in the next 90 days, he definitely owes an apology to Sodom and Gomorrah. Holy moly. Anyway, look, guys, love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Because if we don't, God's going to destroy us. I don't care what you believe. I mean, I care what you believe, but I'm not going to compromise what I believe. You feel me? God is going to destroy this country. And if he does, as I'm sinking into the ether, I'll say we deserved it, because we deserve it for this shit. Holy moly. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America. We are the media. Till next time, guys.